In ancient Japan, people believed in the concept of omens, of signs and wonders that occurred in everyday life that portended things to come in the future. And whenever they saw these things, they would go find an onmyoji, or an ancient Japanese wizard, to go divine and interpret these signs for them. And in today's story, one man gets one such omen that's very grave and spells his doom. However, things do not turn out the way he or anybody else expected. Yokoso owashitare. Welcome back to another story. And if you like Japanese history, Japanese culture, storytelling in general, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, because there are plenty more stories where this one comes from. And without further ado, let's get into the story. Once upon a time, ima wa mukashi. In the province of Noto, in the district of Fugeshi, there was a man who went by the name of Fugeshi no Mago, which means the grandson of Fugeshi. I'm guessing there's a story here about a man named Fugeshi who settled this place, and so they named the district after him, and the guy in the actual story is his grandson. Or the story just didn't know this guy's name, so it just called him Fugeshi Kid and then left it at that. Anyway, when this Fugeshi guy was young, he was also pretty poor. Poor by aristocratic standards, though. If there's one thing I've learned about this collection of stories, it's that it has zero time for anyone who can't afford servants. But it just so happened that one day, in this guy's poverty, he was spending time at home feeling sorry for himself, when suddenly there was a sign. A strange supernatural phenomenon. A mystical, magical omen that did something. The story doesn't actually tell us what the magic sign was, only that it happened and that it freaked this Fugeshi guy out so much that he went to an onmyoji, again, which is basically an ancient Japanese wizard, and had him divine the meaning of this omen. And after the onmyoji did whatever he did to interpret the sign, he returned to Fugeshi with a grave look on his face, and he told Fugeshi in a low, serious voice, "This is a terrible, terrible sign. You will need to exercise extreme caution on the day that this omen will come into being. If you make any misstep or falter in any way, your life will be forfeit. Be warned." Now, Fugeshi was young and broke, but he wasn't stupid. He was not about to tempt fate by not listening to this onmyoji's advice. If there was an omen that promised his demise if he wasn't careful, he was going to do everything in his power to stay safe. And so after the onmyoji gave him some instructions, he followed them to a T, and immediately set about making preparations for the dreaded day. First, he decided that he needed to find a place that was as safe as could possibly be, and ritualistically close himself off from any potentially baleful influences outside. He didn't trust his usual house, because it might suddenly cave in and crush him. But if he wasn't going to stay in a house, that meant he'd have to go wander around outdoors for a bit. The mountains were a bad idea. You never know when falling rocks or a landslide might happen, or heck, maybe a tree will fall on you. No. In his mind, the safest place was on the beach, away from any heavy things that might inexplicably fall on him. So, with his plans decided, he waited. Soon the day came, and as soon as the rooster had crowed, he quickly made some preparations, and, taking one trusted servant with him, left his home and headed for the beach. Now, I wasn't exactly sure what this next line meant, but I think it was saying something to the effect that the district of Fugeshi was a very unusual place, and because of that, this Fugeshi guy ended up walking around for a long time before he found a place that he thought was even remotely safe. And after being on his feet for a long time, he finally got sick of walking and decided to take a break. Enjoy the sea breeze and the sand. And he laid down. After spending some time in this spot with nothing much happening, and it seeming like nothing really could happen, he started thinking that maybe he should just spend the entire day here. I mean, who doesn't want a whole day vacationing on the beach? So he proceeded to big chill, as they say. That is, right up until about high noon, when this Fugeshi guy happened to be gazing northward out across the sea, when he noticed that something wasn't quite right about the horizon. Upon further inspection, he saw a massive, gargantuan tidal wave that he guessed was about 100 jo, which I believe would make it something close to about 100 feet tall. and this wave was barreling right towards him and his one servant. When Fugeshi saw this, he yelped and sprang to his feet. After taking a second to process everything, he turned to the one servant that he had with him, and he asked while on the brink of panic, "Look, do you see how high that tidal wave is? This is insane. What do we do? If that wave makes it all the way here, this whole place will be annihilated. We gotta get out of here." The servant, though, just kinda stared blankly at Fugeshi with a confused look on his face, blinked a few times, and then said in a clearly confused tone, "Sir, what are you talking about? The ocean is as still and flat as a piece of wood. There's no tidal wave. Did you by chance get possessed by some crazy spirit or something? I mean, we are wandering around outside on a day when we should be ritualistically staying indoors, closing ourselves off from outside evil influences." Now it was Fugeshi's turn to question his partner's sanity, and he responded with a hint of anger added to his panic. "What? No, I'm not possessed. Can you not see that freakish tsunami that's gonna swallow you, crush you, or drag you out to sea if you keep sitting here talking back like this? When I first saw it, it was 100 feet tall, but it does look like it's getting shorter as it gets closer, but it's gonna be plenty big to take us out. We gotta do something." At that, Fugeshi got up and made a run for it. But he had only gone a step or two when his servant grabbed him and said, "Sir, you're acting crazy. You definitely have been possessed by something." Fugeshi replied while struggling to get away, "I am not. Can you really not see that tsunami?" The servant insisted, "Sir, there is absolutely no tsunami." At this point, Fugeshi stopped struggling, because he had determined that, in the time he had spent arguing with his servant and getting stopped by him, there was no way either of them could escape. And resigning himself to his fate, he said, "So, this is how it's gonna happen. I'm gonna get tossed about by a tidal wave until I'm gone. How insane. I thought that I could avoid certain death by leaving home and hiding on the beach, and yet this is where fate was waiting for me. It's no use trying to run anymore. I guess I'll just pray to the Buddha and hope for a kinder rebirth." And with that, he knelt on the sand, clapped his hands together, and began praying. After a few seconds, Fugeshi told this servant man, "I told you the wave was 100 feet high when I first saw it. I'm guessing it's now around 50. He then shut his eyes and prayed some more. A short while later, he opened them again, looked out to sea, gasped suddenly, and said, "It's almost here. But there's something else. There's a huge pillar of flame in the middle of it. What the heck is going on? It looks like it's nearly as tall as the wave, which is now around 30 feet tall." Now, this servant had not believed a word out of this man's mouth, but as he watched Fugeshi and heard him describe the scene so vividly and with such apparent sincerity in his voice, he couldn't help but start to wonder, is this real? Am I just not seeing things? I mean, this man received a horrible omen. Maybe there's something more that I can't see because I'm not the one who got the omen. And with thoughts like these now racing through the servant's mind, the fear of impending doom slowly crept over him, and he, against his better judgment, also started weeping in fear for his safety. And so both men sat there in despair, with Fugeshi alternating between praying with his eyes closed and opening them to comment on the height of the wave as it drew closer, like some sort of messed up doom clock. He just kept counting. Now it's 10 feet tall. Now it's 5. Now it's 4. Now it's 3. Until finally he uttered the words, "It's here." With that, he closed his eyes for what he thought was the last time, put his hands together, and prayed harder than he ever had in his whole life. Then the wave hit the beach. Or at least there was the sound of a massive wave making landfall. The servant man heard something faintly resembling a wave washing ashore, but still saw nothing, which only served to freak him out. Why was he hearing the slush of seawater over the beach when the ocean itself looked completely calm? And why was Fugeshi freaking out so much about an invisible wave with a magic flame sprouting out of it? He didn't understand. And neither did Fugeshi, who sat there for a while, waiting for the wave to hit him. But it didn't. There was the sound, sure, but no actual wave. And when he opened his eyes and looked around, it was gone. Stunned, he said aloud, "There's no more wave. What the heck is going on?" Shakily rising to his feet, he cast his eyes around the beach when something caught his eye. There was something round and black in the sand near them that definitely wasn't there just moments before. He then said to his servant, pointing at the thing, "What's that down the beach?" The servant saw it, and I guess hadn't had enough of weird supernatural occurrences, because he responded with, "Hold on, I'll go check." Sprinting over to this thing, he soon realized it was a round, lacquered box with a lid. He pulled it out of the sand, wiped it off, and then brought it back over to Fugeshi. When they opened it up, not sure what they were going to find, there was a single obi, that's a belt-like piece of cloth that they use to tie kimono clothes, that was made from the finest material either of them had ever seen. Of course, neither of them could make heads or tails of this, until Fugeshi suggested, "I guess this is just a gift from the heavens. I still have no idea what's going on, but I suppose let's just go back home." And so together the men left the beach and headed back. Not long after this, Fugeshi's entire household became extremely rich, and Fugeshi himself became a very capable man and began moving up the social ladder. It was around this time that he was first given the name Fugeshi no Mago. But the years passed with Fugeshi living in relative luxury and ease until he grew old and his faculties began to wane. When at long last he passed away, he passed the magic obi on to his son, who also grew in wealth, power, and prestige, so much so that one day, word of his family's meteoric rise to prominence made its way to the governor of the province, Yoshishige no Tamemasa. Now, Tamemasa wasn't exactly what you would call a moral guy, and when he heard about this magic obi, he immediately demanded that Fugeshi's son show it to him. But he also hatched a plot. He came to the Fugeshi home with a whole host of his men, not to fight, mind you. Taking something like that by military force would have looked horrible for him and probably gotten him in trouble. Instead, they all came as guests and had the people of the house make 3 separate meals for them each day while they were there. Supposedly, Tamemasa brought between 500 and 600 men and commanded that they not only be fed, but fed very extravagantly. The men themselves made a huge deal if any of their free food was not prepared in the absolute best way, and complained mercilessly and threw the food out if their demands were not catered to. The people of the Fugeshi home, while obviously not happy with the situation, were nonetheless a capable bunch and managed somehow to meet these frankly ridiculous demands. At first, Fugeshi-san assumed that the governor and his men were only going to be there for a short while, maybe a few days at most. But after nearly 5 straight months of this, he realized what was going on. He managed to put 2 and 2 together and surmised that the governor was trying to bring ruin to his house in order to get the magic obi, the magic belt. But Fugeshi-san wasn't going to let that happen. This was a gift given by heaven to his father, and he wasn't going to let it fall into the hands of some horrible governor. And so one day, with this obi tied around his neck and little else, Fugeshi fled from his home and disappeared into the countryside. When the governor realized what had happened, he used it as a pretext to seize all of the assets in Fugeshi's house and move them to his own governor's residence. And so, Fugeshi's son spent the next several years as a wanderer. But perhaps because of the magic of the obi, he never ended up in a poor situation. Eventually, Tamemasa's time as governor was up, and a new governor, Minamoto no Yukito, took over. But Fugeshi's son didn't trust this governor either, and continued living a life as a wanderer until that governor's time also ended. When Yukito left, he was replaced by Fujiwara no Sanefusa, a man that Fugeshi's son actually trusted. So after many years of being homeless and becoming an old man, Fugeshi's son managed to secure an audience with the governor and explained everything. His dad finding the obi, his family becoming prosperous, the abuse at the hands of Tamemasa, and his surprisingly good life as a wanderer. He further told the governor that after many years of homelessness, he wanted to go home. Sanefusa not only believed his story, but felt it was his duty to see this man restored to what was rightfully his, and gave him plenty of goods in recompense. Fugeshi's son, wanting to express his gratitude, and being an old man with no real use for riches or prestige, offered up his magic obi to the governor in thanks. Governor Sanefusa accepted with all due respect, and eventually brought this magic obi to the capital and turned it over to the regent's office, where the person who recorded this story heard of it last and had no idea what happened to it afterwards. And the story ends by once more highlighting how valuable this treasure was, that it was brought into the world with an illusory wave spouting magic fire, and thus it is said that the magic obi was given to Fugeshi no Mago because of some outstanding karma from a previous life. And that actually is the end of the story. The only bit of commentary that I could have would be something to the effect that the nature of karma is something that even the most professional, the most educated of Buddhist priests and sages don't fully understand. And I think that's partly what this story is trying to express, is that this man received a terrible omen of his impending death, but instead of passing away, he was gifted a treasure that granted him prosperity like no other. So, if any of you think you understand how karma works and you can predict how things are going to happen, no you don't. Anyway, that's all I have for now. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like the video. Please subscribe to the channel because there are plenty more stories where that came from. Please let me know what you thought about it in the comments. Was it amusing? Was it funny? What did you think about a giant wave that also spouted fire? I mean, that's quite the physical, natural, unnatural, supernatural phenomenon. And would you be afraid of a 2-foot wave if it crashed onto the shore? Would that do that much damage? I mean, I don't have actually a lot of experience with the ocean despite actually living in Japan. I was raised in the Rocky Mountains and didn't really know what the ocean was until I was in my early 20s. And even then I had only been in it like once. Anyways, if you've been watching all the way up to the end here, I thank you sincerely. Ito kataji ke no koso haberikere, and hopefully we will see you in the next one for yet another story of how a man became extremely wealthy. Only this man did so with a little bit of luck, actually a lot of luck, but also some shrewd business acumen. Is that the right word for this instance? Acumen, maybe? Anyways, thank you so much, guys. Have a good one.